Having learned his lesson, Shen Qingqiu spent the rest of the trip stone-faced until they finally arrived at Shuanghu City without incident. Although the city wasn't large, it was reasonably bustling. After gaining entry, they took up residence at the mansion of Old Master Chen, the city's richest man. He was also the one who facilitated sending someone to Changqiu Mountain Sect to plead for assistance. 2 of the Old Master Chen's beloved concubines had died horribly at the Skinner's hands, and he'd been desperately looking forward to Shen Qingqiu's arrival. He rubbed his beautiful third concubine's small white jade-like hands as he moaned and groaned to their whole party, eyes overflowing with tears. "Immortal masters, you must help us. I dare not let Dia leave my side for 1 second, for fear that the moment she's careless, she'll be killed by that wretched monster." At these NPC-like lines, a powerful sense of déjà vu made Shen Qingqiu's face twitch. He very much did not enjoy the sight of a 60-year-old coot and a young girl in her teens cooing at each other right in front of him. Luckily, Shen Qingqiu retained the divine air of a lofty master. After this perfunctory meeting, he aloofly took his leave to his room, leaving Mingfan to make small talk with Old Master Chen. Certain privileges came with just being a master. No matter how aloof you were, no one dared to say anything. In fact, the more aloof, the more respectful the gazes that trailed after you. Soon, Ning Yingying knocked and entered. "Shizun, Yingying wants to go and walk around the market," she said sweetly. "Would Shizun like to keep me company?" Speaking truthfully, no man could dislike being so prettily cajoled by a young girl. When she entered, Shen Qingqiu had his back facing her, and upon hearing her plea, his heart half melted. He steeled the remaining half and glanced back with the air of one looking up from a book, the essence of a cold and detached intellectual, and said blandly, "If Yingying wants to go and walk around, she may ask several apprentice siblings to accompany her. This master still has things to do before confronting the Skinner." Who else would she ask to keep her company? How could Shen Qingqiu not know? At the same time, how could he not want to go out and play? Up until now, he's been hunkered down inside Changqiu Peak's bamboo house, forced to make being a fake awesome master of arts and literature, meaning everything he did had to be done blandly. Blandly speaking, blandly laughing, blandly practicing the sword, blandly being a poser, bland to the point that he's often had the urge to scatter a handful of salt over his head. What a damn pain! And now, when he finally got a break to take a trip down the mountain, he was still trapped in his room because of the system's stance that the original Shen Qingqiu liked quiet and would be unwilling to mingle. Shen Qingqiu didn't even want to pretend to meditate, so he lay on the bed just pretending to be dead. Shortly before sunset, Mingfan entered the room to deliver a report. Finally, someone had come to talk to him to keep him company. Shen Qingqiu couldn't help but want to weep of joy. Every perk belonged to the male lead, every loneliness to the cannon fodder, accompanying young girls to view colored lanterns and such. None of that was for their lot. "This disciple has closely examined the corpse," said Mingfan. With a solemn expression, he presented the items in his hand. Shen Qingqiu took a closer look. There were 2 stacks of yellow talismans, written upon with a cinnabar ink. The paper had blackened to shades akin to necrosis. "You use these talismans to assess the corpse for demonic energy?" he asked. Shizun's eyes see all. This disciple used these 2 talismans in 2 locations. The first at the soil near the grave of a victim who's been buried. The second beside a yet unburied corpse still at the coroner's. If even the grave soil was this saturated with demonic energy, then that confirmed that the Skinner was undoubtedly of the demon race. Finally, Shen Qingqiu knew what they faced. He cleared his throat, which made his following humph sound even colder. They dared to harm the lives of people within 100 kilometers of Qingqiu Mountain? Since these demonic lowlifes came to our door, they can't blame our disciples for enacting justice on behalf of the heavens. Listen, he really didn't want to say this corny line so full of hot air, but he'd have been OOC if he didn't. Mingfan gazed at him revengefully. Shizun is wise. If Shizun took action, that demon would be taken care of in one strike, ridding the people of evil. Shen Qingqiu could say nothing. It seemed this master-disciple duel was right in the mold of, you reign, I worship, a most joyous union. To tell the truth, Shen Qingqiu was extremely satisfied with Mingfan as a disciple. Even though he was a rich young master and spoilt rotten, he was never even a little arrogant in front of his teacher. Instead, he was absolutely obedient and incredibly respectful. A man could never dislike being worshipped like a god. Mingfan had also single-handedly handled the travel preparations, from arrangements of food to lodging. If his IQ hadn't inevitably plummeted whenever he laid his eyes on the protagonist, transforming him into a schoolyard bully capable of any misdeed, he would also be a promising young sprout. And moreover, as a fellow victim, Shen Qingqiu always felt a kind of pity for this cannon-fodder disciple who, in the end, Luo Binghe would throw into an ant pit so he would be bitten to death by tens of thousands of ants. This trip down from the mountain is for the sake of your training, unless as a last resort, this master will not assist you, Mingfan. As the most senior disciple, you must design careful strategies, lest you let that demon harm our fellow disciples. Yes, this disciple has already devised a tactful formation. As long as that demon... Before Mingfan could finish, a person rushed into the room, interrupting him. Shizun! Luo Binghe's face was stark white as he yelled. Shen Qingqiu's heart thumped once, but he feigned indifference. What happened to make you shout so loudly in such a panic? Ning Yingying, apprentice sister, went with me to the city market earlier today, Luo Binghe said. Once evening fell, I urged her to return, but she refused. Then somehow she suddenly vanished. This disciple searched the entire street once but couldn't find her, and he could only come back to plead with Shizun for help. If Ning Yingying had disappeared at this critical moment, this was no joke. Night had almost fallen. Mingfan leapt up right away. Luo Binghe, you... Shen Qingqiu promptly flicked his sleeves, and the tea bowl on the desk exploded. As a deterrent, it was an OOC, and more importantly, it prevented Mingfan from further digging his own grave. Shen Qingqiu assumed an expression of barely suppressed anger. If it's already come to this, there is nothing more to say. Luo Binghe, come with me. Mingfan, take a couple of apprentices and ask Landlord Chen for assistance, then go and look for your apprentice sister. Mingfan sent one hateful look at Luo Binghe but nodded and hurriedly left. Luo Binghe remained, his head lowered, not saying a single word. Shen Qingqiu knew this absolutely wasn't Luo Binghe's fault. Ning Yingying's role as a female character wasn't just to be lovable and cute, but also to dig her own grave and be a big burden. In the original work, the number of plot twists caused by her sudden disappearances, blunders, or other messes had allowed airplane shooting towards the sky to drag out the plot for hundreds of chapters. At times, Shen Qingqiu had been rather impressed with Luo Binghe's fortitude when it came to accepting harem members. He never refused anyone, daring to accept even the most troublesome of women, and he did this without being screwed over or killed. Shen Qingqiu could only say that, as expected, the brilliant protagonist truly was overwhelmingly cool, awesome, insane, and badass, with a dick longer than the heavens. A normal person definitely couldn't have put up with such things. Luo Binghe, who thought Shen Qingqiu had ordered him to stay so as to beat him and yell at him, said quietly, This entire affair is this disciple's fault. If Shizun wishes to punish this disciple, he will neither resent nor regret it. He only wishes for apprentice sister's safe return. He looked incredibly pitiful. Shen Qingqiu wanted to pat his head, but as the system's existence obstructed this, he forcefully held himself back. Come, he said coldly. Take me to the place where your apprentice sister vanished. Luo Binghe and Ning Yingying had lost each other at the most bustling corner of the market. Shen Qingqiu closed his eyes, and he sensed a barely perceptible thread of demonic energy. He followed that thread, which seemed like it would at any moment fray or snap, until he opened his eyes again and found that he stood at the door of a cosmetics shop. Shen Qingqiu stared at it silently. Could it be that the murderer worked here? Would it be that easy? However, upon entering the cosmetics shop, the thread of demonic energy snapped, dissipating completely. Perhaps the murderer wasn't hiding in the shop and had just come at some point recently. If they had patronized a cosmetics shop, was the skin a demon a woman? Shen Qingqiu made these stabs in the dark, and he sent Luo Binghe inside to ask a few questions, but this yielded no results. This quest had been offered to him expressively so he could level up. Thus, none of its scenes had been in the original work, so he had no point of reference. Shen Qingqiu furthermore acknowledged that he wasn't a master of deduction capable of deep analytical thought, who could infer a multitude of facts from a single clue. When playing room escape or detective games, he'd always run into dead ends. As he was agonizing, the system thoughtfully notified him. We notice that you have encountered difficulties. Would you like to spend 100 points to activate easy mode? Shit, if there was something like an easy mode, you should have said so earlier, Shen Qingqiu snapped. Activate, activate, activate. He fixed his gaze on the yes option for 3 seconds. The option blinked green and disappeared. Then something in the air sent goosebumps all down his neck. Such palpable demonic energy! As if they were afraid that otherwise no one would find the target. Calling this easy mode was no lie. Shen Qingqiu wasn't the least bit ashamed about using easy mode, and with spirits soaring, he strode in the direction from which the demonic energy emanated. A mere 500 steps later, they had left the central district and arrived in front of an abandoned, neglected house. This has to be the place. Just look at these ghastly white paper lanterns. Look at those dilapidated gates. A proper haunted house, don't you see? Shen Qingqiu scored this expression and turned to Luo Binghe, who had been silently following behind him. Return to Chen Manor and notify Mingfan to bring all the disciples and their talismans here. Luo Binghe had yet to speak when his pupils suddenly contracted. He was staring straight at something behind Shen Qingqiu. That didn't bode well. However, it was too late in the end, and a gust of foul wind blew past, slamming the gates open. Shizun, wake up quickly! Shen Qingqiu woke up. Upon opening his eyes, he saw Luo Binghe opposite him, looking awfully distressed, arms and torso bound. As Shen Qingqiu roused himself, Luo Binghe heaved a sigh of relief, eyes brightening. Shizun, Ning echoed. She was tied up with Luo Binghe, her expression miserable. Shen Qingqiu was a little dizzy, and he had no idea if whatever crap the demon had sprayed on them had any side effects. He was in a foul mood. This easy mode was straightforward to the point of mercilessness. It had delivered him straight into the boss's mouth. The worst part was that the dignified peak lord of Qingjing Peak had been unexpectedly struck down by a mini-boss, and thus shortly after he woke up the system shrilly declared, OOC, minus 50 points. He's just spent 100 points to activate easy mode, and now in a flash he'd lost another 50? How could he not be distressed? The original Shen Qingqiu's skill at facing down demons should have made this quest as easy as killing a chicken with a knife. Shamefully, the knife had failed to even hit the chicken. In seconds, Shen Qingqiu discovered something that made his mood even worse. His body felt a little strange. He was chilly, and he had a slight ache all over. Upon lowering his head, he almost couldn't stop a fuck from leaving his mouth. He'd been stripped naked.